If you were to drive through the beautiful, tree-lined suburb of Aberfeldy in Melbourne, Australia, back in the winter of 2000, you would have thought you were looking at the absolute pinnacle of peaceful, upper-class suburban living. The streets were quiet, the lawns were meticulously manicured, and the homes belonged to wealthy families who valued their privacy. But on the evening of June 15th, the silence of this affluent neighborhood was shattered by a burst of gunfire that didn't just end a life. It officially kicked open the doors to one of the bloodiest, most ruthless underworld wars in modern history. This is the story of Mark Moran. Mark was a 35-year-old man who carried a surname that was both a passport to immense wealth and a permanent target on his back. He belonged to the notorious Moran crime family, a powerful, old-school syndicate that had dominated Melbourne's illegal substance trade in western suburbs Underworld for decades. Mark, alongside his stepfather Louis Moran and his brother Jason, operated like royalty in the criminal landscape. They were wealthy, highly aggressive, and used to getting exactly what they wanted through sheer physical intimidation and absolute control. But as the year 2000 rolled in, the old rules of the street were beginning to erode. A new, younger generation of criminals was rising in the shadows, tired of paying dues to the old guard. Mark lived his life with a supreme, arrogant confidence, believing that the family name made him completely bulletproof. He had no idea that a massive, volatile grudge was festering just a few miles away, or that his nightly arrival at his own front gate had been meticulously timed by an enemy who valued vengeance far more than human life. On the evening of Thursday, June 15th, 2000, the winter chill had settled deeply over Melbourne. Mark Moran spent his evening navigating his various business meetings and social circles before finally steering his luxury vehicle toward his home on Fawner Street in Aberfeldy. It was just after 8 p.m. when he pulled into his driveway. Mark pressed the remote button on his visor, watching as his white security gates began to slowly, mechanically glide open. It was a routine he did every single night, a brief, vulnerable moment where he waited for the perimeter to clear. But as the gates opened, a lone, masked silhouette stepped out from the deep shadows of the perimeter wall. The assassin didn't hesitate, and he didn't call out a warning. Moving with a cold, terrifyingly professional speed, the shooter raised a shotgun and fired directly through the driver's side window. The blast tore through the glass, striking Mark at point-blank range. Horrified and severely wounded, Mark desperately tried to scramble out of the passenger side of the vehicle, stumbling onto the concrete driveway in a frantic attempt to reach the safety of his front door. But the gunman pursued him, stepping into the driveway and firing a second, definitive shot into his head. The assassin then ran down Fawner Street to a waiting getaway car, speeding away into the dark before the neighbors could even comprehend the echoing booms of the gunfire. Mark Moran lay dead on his own driveway, leaving the Moran empire in an absolute state of shock and fueling a scorching desire for retaliation. The Melbourne Homicide Squad immediately launched a massive investigation, but they found themselves hitting a wall of absolute silence. In the underworld, you don't talk to the police, you handle things yourself. While the murder technically remained unsolved on paper, everyone on the streets knew exactly where the shadow of suspicion was pointing. The prime suspect was a 29-year-old man named Carl Williams. Carl was someone the old-school syndicates had completely miscalculated. He was short, slightly overweight, and possessed a round, boyish face that earned him the nickname the baby-faced killer. To the Morans, Carl was just a low-level, insignificant driver and pill presser, someone they could bully and dismiss without a second thought. In fact, just a year prior, an intense argument over drug territories had ended with Jason Moran shooting Carl Williams in the leg. The old guard thought that bullet would teach Carl a lesson about his place in the hierarchy. They had no idea they had just awakened a sleeping monster. Carl didn't get scared. He got intensely, pathologically focused. He realized that the only way to survive and claim the throne was to systematically eliminate every single person who had ever looked down on him. The execution of Mark Moran was just the opening salvo in Carl's personal blueprint to dismantle the Moran family piece by piece, sparking a gangland war that would eventually claim over 30 lives across Melbourne. For years, Carl Williams operated like a ghost, orchestrating hits from the safety of his inner circle while the streets of Melbourne ran red with blood. But the law eventually caught up with the chaos. In 2004, Carl was finally arrested and subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 35 years after being convicted of ordering the murders of multiple Underworld rivals, including Mark's brother, Jason Moran, and his stepfather, Lewis Moran. Carl was sent to the maximum security Acacia unit inside Bar 1 prison. He believed that behind those thick concrete walls and monitored security cameras, he was entirely safe from the vengeance of the streets. He was wrong. By 2010, Carl had begun cooperating quietly with investigators, dropped hints that he was ready to talk about the unsolved execution of Mark Moran and the high-level police corruption that protected the syndicates. This made him an incredibly dangerous liability to powerful people on both sides of the law. On April 19, 2010, while Carl was sitting at a table in the prison computer room, a fellow inmate named Matthew Johnson, the leader of a fierce prison gang, quietly stepped up behind him. Armed with a heavy, solid iron stem pulled from an exercise bike, Johnson struck Carl repeatedly in the head before guards could even respond. Carl Williams died on the prison floor, taking the definitive, absolute secrets of the Mark Moran hit straight to his grave. The murder of Mark Moran remains officially unsolved by the Australian courts, a permanent cold case on the books of the Victoria Police. Carl Williams took the final answers with him when his own war caught up with him inside Bar 1 prison. The story of the Moran family and the war they triggered serves as a deeply moving, somber reminder of the cold, cyclical reality of criminal ambition. Mark spent his life surrounded by the illusion of absolute power, believing his surname and his wealth made him untouchable on his own property. But in the violent ecosystem of the underworld, titles and reputations mean nothing when a grudge becomes lethal. The driveway on Fawner Street has long since been cleaned, and the suburban quiet has returned to Aberfeldy. But the echoes of that June night remain permanently written into the history of a city that had to watch its own streets turn into a battlefield. I want to know what you guys think about this massive underworld collapse. Do you think justice was ultimately served on the prison floor? Or did the true masterminds behind the gangland war manage to escape in the chaos? Let's talk about it down in the comments below, and please keep the discussion deeply respectful and constructive. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, look out for one another, and I'll see you in the next deep dive. Bye.